News alert as a crucial hearing is set to get underway in the Senate on the way forward in Syria. Secretary of State John Kerry, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Martin Dempsey, all scheduled to speak their mind on the issue of Syria. Joining me now is Colonel Oliver North, a Fox News military analyst. Colonel, welcome. Good to have you with us today.
Good to be with you, Martha. Thank you.
Obviously, this is a big moment in this discussion. How do you expect this to go? And I have some comments that we're just getting from John Kerry. We know what we expect him to say this afternoon, which I want to share with you as well. But what are your initial thoughts?
Well, I think the mission for senators, the senators on the committee, and that of Secretary Kerry and Secretary Hagel is to somehow get Obama out of the mess that he has made of this. And time is not an ally. We all know that the president is leaving tonight to go to Stockholm for some very important thing and then go to the meeting of the G20 in St. Petersburg. But I don't see that anything is really going to happen until the 9th or 10th when everybody comes back to session. These are extra session hearings that we're about to see from the Armed Services Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committees. I believe that what the Congress will eventually do is pull his fat out of the fire. That is, they don't want to be blamed for something terrible happening. I think bad things are inevitable as a consequence of the way this whole thing has been approached. And what these folks are going to have to start doing, because the administration clearly has not done this, Martha, is they are going to have to ask the what if and if then type questions that Obama has not asked.
I mean, it appears from what the president has told us so far that he views this as a punitive strike, that Syria needs to be punished for the use of chemical weapons. And I think that's, although it's a sentiment that I think many people can, understand the emotion behind, the question becomes then what? As you just mentioned. And today when the president spoke, he gave us a little bit more insight because he was criticized for not having any strategy. So he gave us a little bit of that strategy today. And he said he wanted to degrade Assad's ability to carry out these kinds of attacks. He also wanted to upgrade the opposition, to help the opposition strengthen. And one can surmise from that he wants to be able to try to tip the balance a little bit in the opposition's favor in order to sort of urge a transition in that country. That's a pretty tall order.
Well, it is, particularly since he's also saying that he wants a quick, limited, and no boots on the ground strike to back up what is essentially his red line comment of last August. That might make sense, Martha, if a year ago, after he'd said that he'd started the hard work of building a coalition, both of internationally at NATO perhaps, or within the Arab League, or within the neighbors at least, and building a domestic audience for this that would support it. But last Friday, when the Brits bowed out, the Arab League wavered, the French decided they couldn't deliver anything but croissants, and our lead behind leader who had a panic attack, we now know that the United Nations has come out against it. We've also heard that Nancy Pelosi, the minority leader, and the Speaker of the House are for it, but I don't see that this is necessarily a done deal, particularly given the way that all of this has been approached, and it now perceived by a lot of people as simply a political rescue mission for Obama's credibility, not that of the United States, and it really is American credibility that's on the line.
So you suggest that there's a lot of politics at play here. And this morning, quite interesting, after the briefing at the White House, we saw Nancy Pelosi come out, we saw John Boehner come out. Both of them said, we support the president on this, and we would like Congress to speak with a unified voice. They also suggested that they weren't going to sort of whip this issue in terms of, whipping up the votes for it necessarily on their own, but they were saying, we're behind it, we're supportive. What if the president does not get support from Congress?
Well, I don't think that that's necessarily all that likely, but he then has the option of going it alone, and there's no real requirement to have Congress advanced approval for this kind of an operation.
No, but once you've asked for it, if you don't get it, in terms of the credibility of your mission and the unity of the country and how behind it we are, that's a tough situation.
You're absolutely correct. You're spot on. But if he'd simply called Congress into session last Saturday to demonstrate the urgency of this, but instead he went for a round of golf with Joe Biden, and tonight he's going to Sweden and then to the G20 summit. I mean, this makes absolutely no sense in terms of ultimate credibility in trying to get something that he really believes needs to be done It's not happening. And that's, quite frankly, another failure of leadership in this administration.
You know, we're just watching a hug between Senator John McCain and Senator John Kerry, or former senator, I should say, now the Secretary of State. They're longtime friends. They were both in Vietnam together. They have, you know, John Kerry voted for the war in Iraq, and then he voted against it famously, and that caused him a lot of problems. This is a Code Pink protest that we have going on, which we did anticipate. We did get word that they were in the room. This has sort of become something that we expect in these kind of forums, but enough of that, I guess. And back to my question about John Kerry and John McCain. John McCain wants very much to go forward with this, but he wants assurances from the president that it'll be done in a substantive enough way to have an impact.
Well, look, we know that 2 or 3 days of cruise missile strikes, even though they're very accurate, is not a strategy. I mean, there's no doubt. There's no history where cruise missile strikes have done anything to change things on the ground of any significance. The closest we came to that was in 1986 when we attacked trying to take out Gaddafi. And that was done because he killed 27 Americans in a disco in Berlin. Now, and for the better part of 2 years, he was very quiet. But this is bigger. This is a civil war. This is a failure to support the resistance that he encouraged, and now the failure to even deliver a single bullet, which he promised to do as early as May. And so there's nothing in what this administration has done that leads you to believe that they've thought out the consequences of acting or failing to act. And hopefully this committee will ask some of those very tough questions.
Yeah, it's very interesting what you're saying about, you know, what has been done over the last several months and whether or not the work has been done and the groundwork has been laid to build that coalition that we talk about. It was interesting to me that late last week they sent out a list of all the different phone calls that had been made by the president, by the Secretary of State, you know, lots of different heads of state of different countries around the world, sort of in an effort to prove, you know, that they were doing that kind of work. But that just happened in the last few days.
Exactly right. All this should have started way back, right after he made the red line comment. Now, here's something that they ought to ask about, and I know we're going to break quickly, but they've got to enhance the security of all our embassies in the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa, because 9/11 anniversary is just 8 days away, Martha.
That's true. Colonel North, thank you.